Pause and food rest and let your food digest. Okay. So anyway, we want to support local businesses, so that's why we get caterers like that, like Chef Crystal. She's a good family friend, so we're thankful for her. And somebody want to clap one more time? Give yourselves a round of applause. So anyway, I'm a little comical, but we are here for a serious concern and issue in our state, the foster care system. And just to let everybody know, we are going to be going Facebook Live in a few minutes. So if you have not liked the Harvest of Hope Family Services Network page, please do so you can stay connected to our events and info that we'll be doing throughout the valley, throughout the state, really. So I want to just give you some just synopsis of Harvest of Hope and why we are here in the state of Arizona. Dr. DeForest Soares, he's the founder of Harvest of Hope out of New Jersey, and he's also the pastor of First Baptist Church in Somerset. And they had a border baby crisis, and the governor turned to the church to respond to the need. And 1,440 children were fostered and adopted in that process. Many, over 200 children parents were licensed and trained to be foster parents. And so Dr. Soares was telling that story at an event, and Governor Ducey heard him and knew about our crisis. At the time, I think, when that story was told, we had about 19,000 kids in the foster care system in Arizona. And so Governor Ducey asked him to come help us with the crisis. Now, we all know, as a pastor, and some of us who are believers, that God has called us to take care of our communities. And the government was never supposed to be responsible for taking care of the needs of our communities. And so I always say that the church should hear the clarion call again to be the church and actually meet these needs. James 1:27 says, pure and undefiled religion is taking care of the widows and the orphans. And so these are orphans. And once we understand the biblical mandate, you look at Moses. Moses had a foster mom. He was drawn out of the water and he was fostered by another woman. Jesus had a foster dad. Somebody not. This ain't the pastor session, so I won't preach like I do. Jesus had a foster dad. Remember, he wanted to leave because his wife got pregnant by God? Yeah, okay, maybe y'all ain't heard. Maybe you'll hear that story in a couple of months and it'll refresh in December or sometime around somebody's birthday. It ain't Jesus' birthday. But anyway, great story. And then if you are a believer and you've been adopted by God, Romans 8 says we are the children of God that did not receive the spirit of adoption of fear, but we received the spirit of adoption in which we cry out, Abba, Father. We call him Daddy. And so we want to be able to move in that mission and that mindset and say, you know, if God has used foster parents and adoption throughout the scriptures, throughout the gospel, we're adopted by God. How can we actually walk this out in this crisis in Arizona? So that's why Harvest of Hope is here in Arizona. And I'm, if you missed it, I'm the director of church recruitment, and I help with church awareness, getting churches to be involved to start ministries. But we're also reaching out to organizations, fraternities, sororities, nonprofits who say, you know what, I want to be involved too. I'm not a church, but I have a heart for this. And so we're opening up and expanding. And so we have a lot of new faces here today because we have, if 1,000 churches in Arizona or organizations responded to the needs, we could eradicate the foster care system. And amen, clap for that. But that's what we have. We have to be willing to take that risk. And so we're going to have an awesome panel come up. And before that, I want to acknowledge some people in the room. We have Rayetta Sanchez from Arizona, DCS. Thank you, Rayetta. You can stand up. We'll have you give remarks at the end. Okay. The South Mountain Community College president, Sherry Olson is here. Thank you so much for being here. It's awesome to have you. Chanel Poe, elected official of the Ball School District. Thank you so much for being here. Anyone else that is important that I must acknowledge? Because I don't want you to leave and say he didn't acknowledge me. Okay. All right. Everyone, all pastors and ministry leaders, organizations, thank you, everyone. Guess what? You're all important. Okay? There we go. Sesame Street. All right. Make everybody feel happy. So now, from that point, we have great organizations in Arizona that have responded and are meeting needs. We have Jenica McCaster from Care Portal, which is on the preventative side. We have many organizations, but yet we still have 16,700 kids in foster care. So that means we need a collective effort. If there's only a few doing all of the work, then that means we got to step in somehow. And so the group home problem is also a huge problem. We have about 2,000 kids in group homes, about 2,700 kids in group homes. I think that's the number. And so we want to help get them out as well. So that's the crisis, that's the strategy, that's the synopsis of what's going on, and the biblical foundation of why we do what we do. And so we're going to have some panelists come up, and we're going to have a foster care panel. We're going to go live on Facebook. So if you want to tweet this or hashtag do HOH Network, Harvest of Hope Network, let that be your hashtag. If you take any pictures, let that be your hashtag. We're going to go live, but I'm going to introduce our panel, and please feel free to go to the Harvest Hope page again and share it from there to be live. Barisha Black, she's the Executive Director of Foster Care Initiatives. We're going to have her come up first. Yes, thank you. Christy Elise, former investigator for DCS. She's with us tonight. Give her a hand as she comes. Lady Christine Logan from the Antioch Church of God in Christ. We have her. Please give her a hand as she comes. And Pastor Robbie Simpson of Hope International Church. Come on, give him a hand as he comes. Now, if you have any questions for the panelists, there are scratch paper on your table. If you want to ask any questions about foster care, how you can get involved, there's some rich stories right here that we're about to get into. And so I want to make sure you guys have an opportunity to ask the question. So write them down on a little scratch paper. There's pens there for you. And we're going to collect those. So if you have a question, just raise it in the air and wave it around like you just don't care. Okay? Cool? All right? I'm a hip hop artist too, so I'm sorry. It just comes out sometimes. Forgive me. So, Lady Logan, first of all, before we start, I want to start with you. I just want to celebrate that you and your husband, Pastor Logan, have been married for 40 years. 40 years. That's awesome. I'm not even 40 years old. I can't even imagine being married 40 years right now. That's a long time. I'm not even 40 years old yet. But that is beautiful. That is beautiful. It's beautiful to the community. It's beautiful to display the love of God. So, and your story is amazing. Can you just briefly tell us a little bit of your story about foster care? And we have the mics there you guys can use. Yeah? And then I'll ask you some specific questions, but I want them to hear your story.
My name is Christine Logan, and I'm originally from Greenville, South Carolina. A lot of my story is about what I have been told. I was put in foster care at the age of, no, let me back up. I was told that I was left in the hospital, and my aunt, she gave me my name, Christine. And then I was put in foster care, and I stayed in one foster care, I think up until I was about 18. Well, until I graduated from high school. And the reason why I was in foster care, because my father was an alcoholic, my mom had serious mental issues. So the CPS, we call them the social people back then, they found my sisters and brothers and I roaming the streets. It was 7 of us. And 3 were put in one home and 4 were with family members. And to this day, I have a couple of brothers and sisters that I don't know very well because I didn't grow up with them. But anyway, I was in foster care, and thank God it was a Christian home. So I did get a good foundation, and I'm not going to focus on the negative things that went on in that home. I'm going to focus on the positive things. So I'm grateful that I was in a Christian home, and I was raised to love God. And I was in this home, but for some reason, I always felt alone. I felt alone. I didn't know where I come from, with not knowing my mom, not knowing my father. So I was wondering, one day my foster mother, she passed away when I was in 11th grade. And my foster father, he wasn't really engaged in the foster care system. He was doing it because of her. So one day after she passed away, he came in and told my brothers and sisters and I, well, she's gone now, so I don't know what you all going to do.
Wow.
You're pretty much on your own, so. But anyway, one day a recruiter came to my high school, an Air Force recruiter. And I just felt led. I said, you know what? This is my way out of South Carolina because I wanted to see the world. I wanted to make something out of my life and not having any family. So I signed up to go into the U.S. Air Force. Had never been out of Greenville, South Carolina. Had never been on a plane or a bus. Lived a very sheltered life. But something deep down inside told me to go. So I signed up for the military and I left. And I was in the military for a couple years and met my husband. We were both 19. And 40 years later, we're still together. We travel all over the world. God has used me to minister to other children. And for one reason, I didn't do very well in grade school, high school, because I had so many other issues. But I knew that I wanted to go to school. And the Lord used my husband to take me down to the community college and sign up for a couple of classes. And I took off from there. Not only did I get my associates, the Lord blessed me to get my bachelor's and my master's in education. The Lord used my husband to help me to know that I had worth.
Amen.
So any questions? I could go on and on.
No, that is awesome. It's a beautiful story of coming out of foster care and just seeing the success and God's favor on your life.
I was able to teach school in the Department of Defense Schools in Germany. And I also taught school in the Peoria School District. And the Lord has used me to help children that that feel less than other people, So I know He brought me out of that situation for purpose.
Man.
So I got an email from Pastor Stewart here, and that's how I became involved with the Harvest of Hope. So I want to give back.
Thank you.
Amen.
Thank you. Yes, give it up, please. So with that being said, what would have been beneficial to you while you were in foster care? I mean, you may have touched on it.
It would have been beneficial to have some mentors, someone that would have taken me under their arms and mentored me, and some tutoring to help me. Because when I first started college, community college, and my levels were so low, I took a lot of basic classes just to get myself up to where I needed to be, So some mentoring, someone to take me under their arms, that would have helped me a whole lot.
That's good. So if you're in here and you just have a heart and you may not have an organization, we can start there. And I'm sure there's many organizations where you can plug in. That's good. Thank you for that. So last question, how can the church respond to the foster care crisis?
Well, I'm in the West Valley. My husband and I started a ministry in Peoria, Arizona. And we hear very little about the foster care system in that area. So we hope to make people aware of the need of foster parenting. So we're forming a committee, and the church can put a voice to the children that doesn't have a voice, and make it known. And I'm very grateful that someone did take me in, because had that not happened, I just don't know where I would be today. Because later on, when I did find out about some of my family members, I am so grateful that I didn't stay with them. Because it was a tough situation. So I feel like the grace of God was upon me. So the church can do a lot to promote the foster care and make people aware, to open up their homes and to allow children to come in.
Thank you. That is awesome. Thank you so much. Pastor Robbie, what is one thing you would like people in your church family to know about foster care?
Well, the first thing, of course, is that it's our mandate. It's something that God has given us to do, as you before stated, that we've allowed the government, because of resources and all of that, to take over a system that we should have been in charge of in the first place. And so when you contacted me and when I heard about it, I said yes. And being a foster child from Chicago, and kind of your situation as well. I was in foster care from age 2 to about age 12. And then my mother remarried and we moved from Chicago to Detroit. I'm not saying that was a good move, but but nonetheless. But in that foster home, they showed us Jesus. Hated going to church every Wednesday, Saturday, Sunday, Tuesday, Monday. I don't know why I was in the Nurses Guild, but we were there because Mama was there. And the male chorus, the whole works, they showed us a family within a family. So the question about the church can be that family within a family, because you have brothers and sisters, uncles and aunts, grandparents and great-grandparents in some cases, and you have mentors, you have educators, you have teachers, and within the ministry that within themselves are asking, what can I do to help? Well, there it is. This is what we can do to help. So when I saw that you were a part of this program, I said, yes, we're going to do this. So I turned the ministry, Hope International. I said, we're going to be a foster care ministry, period. That's just what we're going to do. That's our destination. That's what God is leading us to do.
So you may have answered this next question, and I believe you have. Why do you think the church is well positioned to respond to the foster care crisis?
I think the church does not understand that it already has the resources. All we have to do is bring those resources together. Because within ourselves, we may not can do it. At one little small church like Hope International, we can't do it by ourselves. But when we connect with Peoria, I'm in Tolleson, West Side. When we connect with Peoria, when we connect with Levine, and we connect with all of where we can go together, pull those. Don't be ashamed to pull your resources together. Even if you have to start with, we ask our parishioners to give into tithe and offering. But the ministry itself does not give tithe or offerings. So if we would take okay, maybe I'm getting into something there.
I'll let you know if you...
Okay, thank you. If the ministry looks at its finance on the month and take 10% of that and toss that aside for foster care, and if each ministry did that, now you're building an account, a budget to where we can all operate together. But that's the point of coming together and not be ashamed or who's going to do this and who's going to do that. It's time out for that now, because we have 17,000, 16,000 children that need our attention. And we can't do it by ourselves. We have to do it collectively.
Thank you. Let's give it up for Pastor Robbie. To his point, to both of their points, since it was very church focused, let me say this. So the events that we have had have been training for churches and ministry leaders. So your pastor identifies a ministry leader that can help run the foster care ministry in your church. Both of you are trained, but the ministry leader takes on ownership and goes to the meetings, the trainings, and gets all the information needed for it to be successful. Harvest of Hope is there as support throughout the whole way. We have a foster care training manual. We have videos from past events that you can see just to walk you through the process, because it is a process. You can have the heart for it and be like, yeah, I want to foster, but there's PS MAP training. There's what in the home, your home has to be evaluated, licensed, and so what I will say to us as the church, we're family. We're come over my house and need what you need. We got something for you, And when we first started, we talked about reclaiming the village. We're natural at being a village people, not YMCA, but we're just naturally, it's innate for us to be village minded. Like, that's my cousin, but that ain't my cousin. You know what I'm saying? That's my brother, but that ain't my brother. That's my uncle, but that's my crazy uncle. You need your car fixed, go see him. Just don't talk to him too long because you're going to hear. You know what I'm saying? Like, you identify the people in your family, your extended family. We used to call them play cousins, right? And so but then when you look in the Bible, it has all of this rich history, this familial language. And Paul calls us brothers and sisters. And so we have to return back to the relationship resources and relationship capital that we have. Another strategic point that I will say about what you said in the West Valley, both of you, is that if you have a smaller church or an organization, the best way the kingdom is displayed is by us partnering together. Amen. Not saying, oh, that's what they do, or we don't have the resources to do it, so we can't get involved. No, we are the body of Christ. So if Tolleson and Levine and Peoria locked arms, Avondale, Litchfield, I don't know about you, but I grew up in the 80s, and one of my favorite cartoons was Voltron. Voltron, they were good. They were the 5 lions, the black lion, the red lion, the yellow lion, the blue lion, and the green line, right? But they always was getting whooped up when they was separate. When they were fighting separately, the enemy always whooped up. And then somebody was like, hey man, let's form Voltron. They'd be like, all right. They didn't say it like that, but that's my version. They were like, all right, we coming together. We form this big robot that is the defender of the universe. And they came together and would always defeat the enemy. And so if we never look at coming together in our regions, west, east, north, south, organizations all over there, then we won't be able to be a solution. And so we got to stop being territorial. Arizona has a problem with that. I will call it out. And we got to stop acting like we have it on lock, like we are the solution. No, this is the kingdom of God. And we are members of the body of Christ. You're an arm, you're a pinky, you're a toe, you're an eye, you're an ear. We need it all together to work together. So thank you so much for that church perspective for that. Christy, so thankful to have you here as a former DCS investigator. First question for you, and I'm thankful for your heart because we met at Representative Reginald Bolding's event, the School to Prison Pipeline. And if you don't know, here's a statistic for you on the Harvest of Hope page. 74% of prisoners come from the foster care system. Arizona is like ground zero to fight the school to prison pipeline. But we have to stop the bleeding in the foster care system. Right. So by the time they get to prison, it's going to be harder to rehabilitate them. But if the bleeding comes from this school to prison pipeline, this foster care system, then we got to start there. And so, Christy, we met and talked about some of that stuff and just your perspective on group homes and your strategy. You just have a big strategy to help. So here's my first question for you. Under what circumstances are children removed from their families?
Well, initially a report comes into the hotline and there are allegations of either abuse or neglect. Anyone can make a report. But once that report is received, the investigator has to go out and do an assessment on the family. They do an assessment, so they talk to the children in the family, talk to the parents, they talk to the source and any type of background information. And then after assessment is done, a decision is made whether to remove or not. A decision is made whether to remove or not. And so if there's enough evidence that, we feel that is substantiated enough that we can remove, then we remove. So for example, if an allegation comes in that a child has been spanked and that a bruise or mark was left. And if it's severe enough, then depending on the age of the child and the level of abuse that the child received, then we would remove. There are times when we do leave children in the home and they are offered services, and that's usually the preference. But if not, if a child cannot remain in the home safely, then we remove.
Okay, thank you. Next question. What type of support do children usually require after being removed from a home? And I don't know if that mic is hotter than that one, but let's try that one.
The support that they received, okay, so the state, when we remove children, we refer them to what's called the REBA. We do a rapid response on them. And so what happens is someone from REBA, one of the agencies, comes out and they do an assessment on the children and see where they're at as far as like their behaviors and mentally, and then decide whether they need to be in counseling or what, how that works. In my opinion, one of the hardest things for me as a worker was to not only remove a child, but then separate siblings. Because a lot of times when you have abuse and neglect in a home, the children cleave to each other because that's all they have is each other. And so when you remove children and then they're losing their parents, and then they lose their siblings. That's one of the hardest things that I've ever had to deal with. I remember removing a sibling group, and the child had already been in care once and been returned back to the home. We removed a second time. And at this point, when we removed, the child was old enough that she had younger siblings, and because her parents were using drugs, she was kind of the parent over them. And so when I went to place them, because they went into group homes, they were separated from each other. And she just said, "Miss Christie, I can't do this anymore." And she was 8 years old. And so I took that home with me because it was just very difficult to see siblings separated. And so I think it's important that when all possible, we leave the children together. And I think it's important that even if they have to be placed in a group home setting, that we keep them connected to their culture, because a lot of times culture is lost. And people say that, well, we're all the same. Well, we're not all the same. We're not all the same. And so a lot of different cultures need to stay connected to their culture. And so I think, and that's something that is lacking, and I would love to see more of that.
That's great. I love that. I want to ask you an additional question. Just your take on group homes and how can we start being a solution in the area of group homes. What are your thoughts on that?
I've never been a fan of group homes. I almost feel like, and there are different group homes are run differently, so you can't clump all of them into the same thing. And we do have a crisis in our system. So there has been times when I went out to remove a child and there was nowhere to place them. So they stayed the night in offices after hours on cots. So we definitely have an issue. And so group homes are what they are for now, I've never liked group homes. I feel like a lot of times when I would bring children into a group home, the first thing they do is take their things from them. And a lot of times you have to understand group homes, a lot of times you have children that are coming out of probation. And so they're placed in a group home, and maybe that's a good setting for them because they need that there. They may not need their electronic devices or whatever. And so those are automatically removed. But for other children who are innocent, they're there because their parents messed up, and now they've been removed, and now they've been placed in a group home. It's almost like they're in detention. It's like they come in and their rights are taken immediately, and it's like, well, and then they have to earn their things. And I felt like, well, they haven't done anything wrong. Why is it that they have to earn their things? And of course, group homes, they want to stay private. They don't want everyone to know where they're at. But at the same time, you've already lost everything, and now you're losing your outside connection. And so I've never really been a fan of group homes. That's my take on that.
No, that's good. I mean, because we do want to get the 2,700 kids out of group homes. So we have to think through these, and there are healthy group homes. And so, it's just something that we need to engage on every level. So we have children who always talked about, let's adopt babies. And then the cultural piece is another thing. That's huge. But also these teenagers, because it's hard for people to say, oh, I don't want a teenager. You know, they're already grown and or think they grown and set in their ways, but they need love too. And so they're often overlooked. So, you know, another strategy of Harvest of Hope is to start tackling the group home problem in Arizona. So thank you so much, Christy, for your experience in those stories of, especially the 8-year-old girl who had enough, who has to make a decision to say, I've had enough of group homes. And so thank you for sharing that. Barisha Black, she works with our Harvest of Hope team very diligently, and she's a member of Remnant. So
yes, that's my pastor.
So what's one myth you would like to correct about foster care and adoption?
Yeah. So I would like to say that I also grew up in foster care, spent 15 years, and I really don't believe that there's like bad children. I think children are victim to adults and what adults have done to them and the disappointment. And I like to say a lot of times hurt people hurt people. So when you really look at their behaviors and look at what they've been through, then it makes sense the way they respond, why they respond the way they respond. So, I mean, I'm currently fostering a teenager. I've had her for over 2.5 years. And so, and also with my own experiences, I know, you know, and understand, you know, why sometimes the behavior is what it is, you know. And I think just constantly trying to reinforce that, you know, you're stable here, you don't have to leave, you're loved, you're supported, just reiterating those messages, because a lot of times they're going to test, they're going to do things, but just like what was said, you know, previously, a lot of times we're in the system because of what our parents did. They should have been removed. Not, you know, but I mean, it's like a lot of times I think people think it's because of kids' behavior, and so that is a myth, but it's really because of what they've experienced with their parents. 83% of kids come into foster care in Arizona because of neglect, you know, and so that, you know, might be addictions of the parents, that might be abandonment, a lot of different things that encompass that as to why kids have to come up into foster care. And so not, you know, kind of judging the kids or looking at them as them being the problem, but how can we help them? Really kind of just work through that pain, you know, really help them heal is what they need. And so that's where the church can be a great resource. I think was something that was in common in all three of our stories is that we had Christian homes, you know, that helped us out. I had 8 different placements, but my last placement, my grandmother was a Christian and she just loved the mess out of me. So, you know, having that display of God's love in a person can just remove so much damage and problems and things, just reiterating God's love. And so that's what a lot of these kids need. Because as I just even hear in the panel, I'm like, I'm sure everyone would line up to adopt us. Because I'm sure we were cute and cuddly, but, you know, and we need the homes. We also need, you know, families need support. We need prevention for our families. So something our organization does, we love partnering with Harvest of Hope. We also partner with Care Portal because we believe on the prevention side, because my mom was also in the foster care system, and so she didn't get what she needed, and then I came in. So we have to break those generational curses. We have to really help families to have the services and support they need so that they don't keep having kids come into the system. So we definitely need that part of it as well. So I'm a big component of that. And did I answer your question?
Yeah, you did. You did. I saw you looking down at the other paper. I didn't know if you were going to answer that one before I asked you. So you did. You did well. Let's hold that one really quick. But I want to ask this, or just see if you can describe the need that exists for resource families in Arizona.
And I think it's a lot of what's stated. So we know we need more homes and loving families. We need, you know, support. We need prevention services. And these are all things that the church can do. And I love just those human relationships. Sometimes we think we have to have a lot of money to throw at a problem, or we have to have all these different resources when we really just need to show up, you know, to solve a problem. So, and you said, what else do we need? And also, you know, a lot of these kids or teens need mentors. I did see one about what can colleges do. A lot of us went, to college when we was coming out of foster care. The biggest thing that got me through college, and I probably would not have graduated college if I didn't have mentors at the college. After I graduated, a lot of states and schools now offer foster care programs in the colleges. That is so important, because there's so many times when you just kind of want to give up, or things are challenging, you don't know how to kind of reach out for help. So having mentors and support at the schools, a lot of four-year colleges. I'm from California. What we were discovering, a lot of colleges would close during the holidays, during the summers, because they assumed everyone had family to go back to. Right. And that was not always the case for a lot of my foster sibling friends, and that wasn't always the case. So they would be sleeping in cars, they would be homeless, but they would be in college but homeless during those times, and that's really unfortunate. So really looking at programs to extend dorms in the summertime or during holidays, or maybe even programs where kids can go for holidays if they don't have family to return back to. So really just kind of thinking through what it takes, and a lot of times it's those basic supports that people get that they just, may take for granted or don't realize is a lot of times what, a kid in foster care needs.
Yeah. Thank you. So kind of with that, I want to piggyback off the question that I had. How will Harvest of Hope engage community organizations and businesses that cannot directly foster or adopt, but willing to help with the foster care crisis? So we talked a lot about the church helping. So how can other community organizations, and I would say, as far as spreading the awareness, talking about Harvest of Hope, that's number one. We are an organization here that is trying to be part of the solution, and actually I would say opening up to organizations and different ministries and leaders is different, because most of it is just we're looking to the church, and Governor Ducey asked a pastor to do it. But there are fraternities and sororities that have family platforms and a theme or a piece in their overall organization that you can move into. And so you may not have people that go to church per se, but say, well, I want to do something about it. Here's a group that can train you, and you can get some more information. And so what we do is training and support. Harvest of Hope is not a licensing agency, but Barisha does a lot of the training. And so those are ways that you can engage, just thinking out the box. Okay, I may know somebody, like the AKAs, for instance, have a family section in their organization that they, like Harvest Hope, could fall under. And so for churches, it's a brand new ministry per se. But I believe it's the same vein of what we're trying to do. It just looks different because of how the organization is. So organizational structure may be different, but it's still how you maneuver that. So this is new for us, moving into the area of organizations, sororities, fraternities, and all that. And so thank you for whoever wrote that question. And let's definitely talk some more afterwards. Yes, sure.
While I was teaching in the Peoria School District, one of my 7th grade students was very withdrawn. And when I first got here, I came here from Germany. We were stationed in Germany. And I had heard about the group homes, and I had never heard that term before. So this young lady was in a group home. So one afternoon, after I got out of school, I went and found that group home. And Antioch Church adopted that group home. Awesome. And we would go and pick the kids up. We would do their hair. We would have classes with them, hygienes. But our church adopted that group home, under one of the directors. But once the directors changed, we kind of got, Right. But I think that's where the church can come in at, with adopting a group home and doing things for the children. We'd take them shopping for Christmas and just became a family. Yeah.
Right. Thank you so much for that. That was great. One last thing, Barisha, I want to ask you, and then we'll get into some more questions. What are the processes to becoming a foster and adoptive parent in Arizona?
Yeah. So it starts with really connecting with the organization and like even connecting with Harvest of Hope through this work if people are interested in fostering or adopting. You would then attend an orientation just so you can kind of learn some more of the process. You would select one of probably 30 agencies that we have here in Arizona to kind of represent you as your agency, your licensing agency. You would then move forward and do 30 hours of training. In my organization, Foster Care Initiatives, we do training. We have a training contract with the state. We bring the training to your church so that you can do it with your church family. We bring all the materials, all the trainers come, information. You would go through that training, which is usually either 6 weeks or 10 weeks. And then from then on, you would move into the licensing process, and the next step would be licensing your home and doing your home inspection and all of those things. So on average, it can be anywhere 4 to 6 months getting licensed, just depending on how fast you kind of do your steps. And sometimes it depends on where the state is at with like fingerprinting and different things like that. So, yep, that would be the process in getting started.
Thank you so much. Sister Logan, Lady Logan, there is another question for you. What kinds of programs would you develop or recommend to youth transitioning out of foster care when the youth is 16 or 17 years old? What programs would you develop when the young person is transitioning out of a group home that is 16 or 17 or out of foster care?
Okay, I would definitely make sure those youth have assigned them a mentor to walk them through the process of the next stage of their life. So I think we need to have just regular, maybe some training, you know, and let them know what's out there, you know, because you know, I didn't have that, you know, I didn't know, you know. I'm grateful for the experience in the Air Force, you know, that helped me to see that there was a lot out there for me to do. But I think that we could set up some different program and just college prep classes, you know, because a lot of foster kids don't even believe they can even go to college. I was one of them.
They're 21, they can give them a college degree.
Say it again.
They can, in Arizona, if they're going to college, they can stay in foster care, I think, until they're 21.
21. 'Cause I never had anyone to talk to me even about going to college.
Right.
You know, so I think those programs are very important. We need to definitely have another step for the kids when they get out of foster care, you know.
Yeah. So. And there are many organizations that help with that. Like we have D-Free, everybody on the, if you look on your tables, Dr. Sori is also the author and the founder of D-Free, Financial Freedom. It's a strategy for leading congregations and community to financial freedom. One thing that causes a lot of the problems in foster care or just in our communities is poverty and debt. And so we don't know how to manage our money or know how to make money, and we have to be taught and trained. And so there are many, many resources. D-Free is one of those. So please look through that because it is very beneficial to help you know, get us out of debt. And I'll say one thing, Dr. Sori says that debt is a bigger problem than racism in America. America is in trillions of dollars of debt, but because America is, we don't want to talk about our own debt. So we focus on an issue, but many of these people are just trying to survive and do drugs, sell drugs, whatever have you, you know, turn to substance abuse because they're trying to cope, they're trying to survive.
Because I can remember, Pastor Stewart, no one even balancing a checkbook, just life skills.
Yeah.
You know, no one taught me that. You know, I learned, you know, just balance a checkbook. You know, even when they would pay us in the military, that was the most money I ever had in my life. I didn't know what to do with it. You know, so we need a lot of those, you know, those type skills just to help us to cope. Right.
So, did you want to add anything to that last question? I felt like you did. Okay, yeah, go ahead. So, what can you do for youth aging out?
And also with mentorship, it's important because it's important to have life skills, but it's also important to have support. I mean, I just remember being 18, and I was in foster care too, so that's interesting. But I remember being 18 and needing my mom. I got adopted, and my mom, so once I left and I went to the military, but I always needed my mom. But a lot of times when these kids they age out, they don't have anyone, and so it's important that you have someone that is there to support you as well. Mm-hmm.
Well, there was a time in the military when I became ill, and when you become ill, they will kick you out. And my first thought was, if they put me out, where am I going?
Right.
I had no place to go back to. Wow. So I hurried up and got well.
Yeah, right. I was going to ask that. They didn't have emergency back then. You just prayer and some Vicks.
There you go.
And some Sprite, ginger ale. You better drink some ginger ale and go lay down. That's cultural. Y'all don't know that. It's culture. What can schools do to support foster kids? That's a question we had. Anyone?
Being an educator for 30 years, the school system has a organization within itself to help foster parenting. And because of certain laws, the FERPA law and things like that, we can't disseminate that information, say this family needs help. But kind of behind the scenes, we have a liaison from the school that works with homeless and works with the foster care system. So there is a system in place. You just have to know where to go and who to ask for at the school where your children go. Just go and ask, is there a liaison for homeless? That's usually the same person that handles the foster children as well. So the educational system does have it. We just do not make use of it because we don't know it's there. And it's not publicized because it can't be because of the laws.
Right.
Also, to kind of piggyback on the financial situation, growing up, of course, our parents would tell us, go to school, get a good education, you get a good job. That doesn't exist anymore. So we're looking at not just saying get a good job, but create an income. It's more than just having a job, but create an income. Yeah. And you want them to have an income, but again, that takes mentoring. That takes people that are willing to give volunteer of themselves to say, I'm going to teach that young man, that young lady how to survive in a system that doesn't want them to survive. So that's another part, the financial part. I didn't know that until today. The financial part is highly important for their success in life. It's not just the church, but it is the financial.
Yeah, it is. Thank you. Just real quick, I got just some rapid fire questions if we can give some brief answers to close out the panel. The panel has been great so far. It's been awesome. You guys have done a great job. Why do DCS workers, or why does DCS work against the parents? I guess there's a misconception that they work with parents.
Okay.
Wow.
Woo, okay. DCS does not work against parents. Our goal is to work with parents. However, we cannot put children back. And I say I don't work for them anymore. I haven't worked for them since April. But I still believe in what they do. And their goal is always to return children back to their homes, but it has to be in a safe environment. Because if not, then we're on the other side of you didn't protect this kid, and now this kid is no longer with us. And because you don't have eyes into a home, you can only go off of your assessment. And so when you try to work with a family, and not all DCS workers are the same, but most of us come in with a heart that we want to help families, that we want to help children. And so we come in with that mentality. But a lot of times, parents can't get past the issues that they have. A lot of times it's drug issues. And although they try, I assume that they try it or they work at it, but a lot of times it's hard. A lot of times they're relapsing. So DCS does not work against families. We work with families, but eventually we have to make a decision as to whether we can return the child back home or not, and a lot of times it's not.
Thank you so much. So I'll answer Oh, well, yeah, go ahead. State the question, then I'll answer the rest of these.
Keep getting questions. We're gonna be here all
About
night.
7, y'all keep Sorry. No more questions. We're saving for September 16th at our next event. Okay, there we go.
So
Email us.
yeah, so I'll answer this one. So the number of children that are aging out, the last I kind of looked at numbers, and numbers are going down. It's about maybe 700 a year that are aging out of the system. And there are programs that do help them, and I think you stated earlier too, they can sign themselves back into care and stay till 21. They're in school and working, and there is a part of the department that works with transitioning youth that kind of helps them, might help them with rental assistance, education vouchers. Tuition is waived at ASU if they go to ASU. There's some support programs on college campuses that kind of help them. So there are those tangible resources. I think the biggest need is having those relationships. We all need relationships, and so having those mentors. It's always a lack of mentors for teens aging out. So mentors would be good, and just having those relationships to help support them through those resources. Because if you don't have that support, a lot of times it's hard. Like we say, about only 3 to 5% actually graduate college. There might be 6% now of all the youth that go, because a lot of times they drop out because they don't have supports. Mm-hmm. So they really need people and mentors and support. And does a person's financial status limit them from being a foster parent? All of that is taken into account, your financial status. But the biggest thing is, do you have the space in your home to bring another child in your home? Do you have the space? Are you able to care for them? There is financial support to care for kids in care. So all of that is just kind of factored in. But if it's something that you don't feel like, if you don't have the space, or like financially, if your check was late and then you can't feed the kid, then you might not, need to be doing it right now until you can get more on a better financial status. But they will take all of that into consideration. So I'm getting all the questions. What are the best ways?
You're on a roll. Keep going.
Best ways to support birth parents. And my organization, we have our director of birth parent engagement is here. His name's Joe, and he's amazing. But he's helping to train parent partners and mentors, and those are actually parents who have been successfully reunited with their kids to help other birth parents that are going through that process. Going to court with them, being an advocate, being a support with them, because so many times when they're faced with crisis, they're in isolation, and families need support too. So the more we can do that, and that's, roles that people in the church can play, being a parent mentor, just helping a mom learn, how to parent. A lot of us become parent. There's not a lot of times we don't get training on becoming a parent, and we just parent out of what we know or how we were parented. And so just really helping walk alongside a birth family in this process, or birth parent, would be a great role for the church as well.
How can we specifically address the racial disparity of African American children in foster care? This is a very good question. And I think that it's what we've been talking about all night. It starts back in our communities. It starts back to African American community actually being a community and actually supporting each other. So if we see a mother or father that is struggling, back when I was little, my neighbor, if I was wrong about something, my neighbor would check me, and then they would tell my parents. And so, and I think, we can't depend on a system to fix the issues within our culture. We have an issue with the prison systems that he already addressed, but it starts back with our communities being a community again. So if you wanting a DCS solution, it's not going to happen. It has to start in our community.
Take back the village. So the reason why African American children are disproportionate in our system, because they usually represent 11 to 15% of the general population, but then when they're in foster care, they are about 35% of the kids that are in care.
I asked for black children, they never would give them to me.
And that's an issue.
I kept saying, "Where's kids at?"
That's an issue because they don't And we have a DCS here, right? At this table, we have a lot of DCS here. They don't necessarily place children according to what their culture is. And that's something that I would love to see addressed as well. They're just placed because we have a lack of homes. And we can't just let them sleep in offices, so they place them where there's an opening. But I would love to see more of our children placed in African American homes so that they can be connected at least to their culture. But we have to have the homes available, so this is why this is good. We have to have the homes available for them. But they don't look at that when they place children. The only children that have that is Native American children. Native American children, we have to consider Native American families because of the Indian Child Welfare Act. But the Latinos and African Americans, that consideration is not given, and I would love to see that change.
Yeah, that's a major issue. Last question, why are the churches promoting foster care? Because it's biblical. The church has somewhat, when you read the book of Acts chapter 2, you have this thriving church full of life. 3,000 people get saved, hear it all in their languages, and then what do? They continue with the apostles' teaching. They fellowship together daily. They break bread. They pray. They worship. And they meet each other's needs as their own. And the Bible says, and the Lord brought the awe back into the church and added to that church daily. There are, and just, that's biblical, that's a high level. And then on a government level, I'm on the Governor's Council for Child Safety and Family Empowerment. Governor Ducey asked Dr. Soares to help Arizona with this issue, to recruit churches, to start foster care ministries, to have foster and adoptive parents come from the church. And so that's why the church is leading this effort, because the church was always supposed to lead this effort. And so no slight on any other organization, but as pastors and believers of Jesus Christ, we unapologetically want to walk out the gospel and meet each other's needs as our own. And if that's taking a kid in our home for 30 days, if it's doing respite care, if it's starting a foster care ministry, whatever it is, we want to see children be made whole. Because while we're having this conversation, somebody doesn't know if their mother loves them, or if they will ever celebrate a Father's Day. And so church, the government has turned the church, and everybody talks about separation of church and state, and you can argue that all day. But when the government starts asking for the church, God say, well, maybe the separation ain't that good on some issues. And so on this issue particularly, these are about children that are hurting. That's right. And so it's not about your political status. It's not about your financial status, your social status. This is about, do we care for children who do not know if they will ever have a permanent home? And you have 4 people on a panel that survived the foster care system. That speaks to the volumes of God. The Bible says that we are overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. Revelation 12:11. They have a testimony. They survived. Now, Barisha went deeper in her story. She can tell you some other stuff. Some people don't survive. And so we want to stand in the gap and say Harvest of Hope is here to be another part of the solution. There are many organizations that do this. But as far as churches, and I'm going to say this, but the black and brown churches don't even have the information that some of the white churches have in Arizona. And so we continue, our children of color begin to have these low numbers and disparity because we don't even have the information. So the first thing we have to do is make people aware of the issue. You know, if you were to go to a doctor and you say, you know, I don't know what's wrong with me. I'm sick. I feel sick. They would start doing all kind of tests to make you aware of the issue. And then once they diagnose it, then they would start treating it. Well, guess what? We've made Arizona aware of the issue. We have diagnosed it, and now we need to treat it. So let's do that and continue to spread the word about Harvest of Hope, because we're working collectively with every organization, any partner. It doesn't matter, white, black, brown, Hispanic, bilingual. It doesn't matter, Republican, Democrat, liberal, green, independent. It doesn't matter, rich, poor. If you got a heart, let's work. Community college, university, let's do it. And I think when we look at the pulse of our culture that we're in, we need to be unified on efforts that help children be made whole and families be made whole. And if it's the church, so be it. If it's an organization, so be it. But let's all work together to the glory of God and not for our own glory, as Linda Morris says, not for egos and logos. Not worry about who gets the credit. I adopted 1,000 kids in our church. Oh, great. Do you want the credit? Or do we want God to get the credit? Or do we want kids to smile and say, I have a family now? That's what this harvest is about, okay? And so I want to thank the panel. Let's celebrate them and thank them for their expertise and sharing their heart.